Madam Chancellor, Mr. President, graduating students, families, it is my distinct honor to present Dr. Robert Slater. I will begin by borrowing something written about the Victorian chemist, public servant, and British government minister, Lord Playfair. The good of his country was a thing to be pursued not merely in the Senate or in the contested fields, but in the laboratory and the council room, in social intercourse, in the humdrum round of daily life. It was a thing never to be lost sight of. Every aspect of the career of Robert Slater that I've been able to gather reflects this vision. His first foray into public life was perhaps at a college in Ghana. After receiving an undergraduate degree, he set off to teach science as part of a volunteer program. When he arrived, he discovered few resources and no curriculum. Between racing around the country on a motorcycle and other adventures, he adapted and improvised and developed a science program for the college. So far, his life has had 3 acts: chemical engineer working on pollution problems, public officials helping politicians deliver the most important improvements in Canadian environmental legislation in the last century, and teacher. I would submit that the common thread in each of it is his ability to adapt, improvise, lead, and teach, first demonstrated in Ghana. Armed with a chemical engineering degree from Imperial College, he came to Canada and worked for companies producing technology to reduce water pollution. In 1971, he joined the Government of Canada, achieving rapid promotion. His Order of Canada citation notes, in over 3 decades with Environment Canada, he played a pivotal role in developing Canada's environmental policy. He played a lead role in the renegotiation of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, acid rain agreements with the provinces, and the U.S.-Canada Accord on Air Quality. He is responsible for initiatives leading to the Canadian Environmental Protection and Species at Risk Acts. Dr. Slater has a strong record of service on boards of many national and international NGOs. He was the last chair of the National Roundtable on the Environment and the Economy. In the interests of the country, he ensured that their publications would remain available to Canadians when this was shuttered. I describe Dr. Slater as the wisest public policy person I have known. For the graduates in this room, you can learn from him for the need for an array of skills to address major societal challenges, even scientists and engineers. We have been blessed at Carleton that on retirement from the full-time public service, he came to teach in engineering and public administration. Armed with a passion for the training needs of regulators, Dr. Slater has led the Regulatory Governance Initiative. This has extended the influence of Carleton with programs for officials at different career stages. This leadership will leave an impression on a generation of senior regulators for a generation. Madam Chancellor, in recognition of his outstanding and exemplary service, building civil society, and continuing engagement with Carleton University, I request that you confer the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, on Robert Slater.
Bob, first of all, it is such a personal honor that I get to do this. By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Governors and upon the recommendation of the University Senate, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa. Congratulations. Very handsome. Okay, another kiss. Sorry, we know each other.
Madam Chancellor, Mr. Vice Chancellor, Chair of the Board of Governors, fellow graduates, graduands, and honored guests. This ceremony is an important rite of passage for the graduands of the Faculty of Public Affairs in the class of 2019. You have all demonstrated a high level of competence in your selected field, and your family and friends are here to celebrate with you. For many of you, this represents a culmination of almost 25 years of formal, structured education. So this is a significant milestone in your journey of a lifetime. And as the Chancellor said, this is something that we should all applaud your accomplishments. This quest that you have been on for this period has consumed you over many years. So the big question you have is, what next? What is the sort of career that you should go for? Now, most of you are Generation Z members, and according to a recent survey of your cohort, the most important thing for you is work that should have meaning. It should be useful, and your contribution to it must be valued. And that's the first time that that result has been the top of the list of attributes for a desirable career. In my mind, you can do that in the public service. And when I say public service, I do not just mean government, but the public interest is ably served by many civil society organizations and the private sector as well. I suggest to you that serving the public interest is serving the public attaches yourself to the values and things we hold in common and will provide the most challenging and rewarding of careers. Let me provide 3 examples. The first, you'd be surprised if I didn't top the list with climate change. How we wean ourselves off fossil fuels and adapt to a different climate is the most immediate and demanding challenge for the public service, for you and for future generations. Industrial economies around the world were built on the assumption of cheap, accessible fossil fuels, and the process spawned the development of the oil and gas and coal industry, the largest and most profitable industrial enterprise in human history. Accompanied, I must add, by a comprehensive legal and governance structure reflecting the knowledge of the day and enabling that industrial development. Unfortunately, that came before the realization that the more fossil fuels are used, the higher the levels of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, and the more acute and critical the consequences of these are now almost the continuous subject of graphic accounts of extreme weather and attendant human misery. This generates public pressure to take action, and there is no one, not one of you in this room, exempt from that pressure, or should feel exempt from that pressure in either a personal or professional capacity. Of course, what you do and the level of effort you apply is your choice. My second example is prompted by a headline that you may have seen earlier this week. It said that Canada's 40-year record in improving life expectancy has stalled. It wasn't too long ago that you could confidently say that someone born today would have a life expectancy of 3 years longer than someone who was born 10 years ago. Today, it has plateaued. There is no indication of current improvement in life expectancy. And the explanation for this is, prime explanation, is the 4,000 deaths a year associated with opioids use. The way we approach this issue and the measures we take will tell us much about our values towards the most vulnerable in our communities. It has been said that the measure of Canada as a civilized society is the way in which we collectively respond to the needs of the most marginalized and vulnerable among us. My last example is artificial intelligence. We are in an era of unprecedented technological innovation, when the time between invention and commercial application is measured in days and weeks. The time to reflect on the likely consequences and the broader implications to society have all but disappeared, yet some foresee challenges to human dignity and integrity that prompted Stephen Hawking to brand this as potentially the most pernicious threat to social stability. The challenge is, how does society encounter and develop a new technology and obtain the benefits associated with that, at the same time as avoiding damage that could occur? The short list of 3 was simply illustrative. And if I were to ask you for your recommendations, you would provide me with a much longer, equally valid list. So if those are the sorts of public service opportunities that are before you, what sort of skills do you need if you want to work on these? And I'm going to give you the 3 which are my top of the list. The first one is leadership. The examples I've given of the sorts of things that you could choose to work on are all very messy. In the words of my academic colleagues, they are wicked or even super wicked problems. Everything is connected to everything else, and a simple tweak here can have unintended consequences over there. Leaders bring order to messy situations. They decide what's important and what's not, what has to be done first, the skills that need to be assembled, and the approach that needs to be taken. They are trustworthy and they are trusted. They are busy people, but they avoid busy work. They are excellent listeners and permanently curious. And many of you have exactly those characteristics right now. You've got them in the sandbox, and they're ready to be polished and applied in your careers. Second thing I want to talk about was integrated thinking. Many experts are involved in advising on public service issues. They will be giving you expert advice on economic, social, and environmental considerations of whatever matter is at hand. The result can often be rather like being in a snowstorm. Each snowflake is a thing of beauty, but if you're not careful, the overall effect can be rather confusing. The integrated thinker can join the dots, explain the linkages, tell you whether they're significant or not, and provide clarity and form to the information that is available. Third one is communications. The leader must inform and persuade others in order to get a place on the agenda of whatever enterprise it is you're working in. Understanding the information your audience needs, the person you're speaking to or the group you're addressing, to make the decision you want is a valuable discipline. And for those of you who have mastered the elevator pitch, you have a skill of a lifetime. I've tried to give you some insight into public service and a few skills that you may have that would be valuable. I'd like to conclude with a bit more forceful piece of advice, and that is to give yourselves one of the best personal treats that you can offer yourself, and that is to get to know yourself. There is nothing more demanding, more satisfying, more fascinating than thinking through who you are, what is important to you, your values, your hates, your fears, your ambitions, and your no-go zones, and why they are what they are. I used to be keen to get my students to think in a longer time frame than the tweet universe. And so I asked them who had known their grandparents, and practically everybody put up their hand. I asked them who had known their great-grandparents, and a surprisingly large number put up their hands. I then asked who expected to know their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren, and everybody put up their hands. So there were two questions that I asked them to answer. First one, would your great-grandparents be proud of what you are doing and what you're going to do? And the second question was, would your great-grandchildren be grateful for what you have done? Last week, my wife Karen and I were on a plane full of young Canadians returning from France, where they had attended the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings. They were the great-grandchildren declaring their gratitude to their grandparents, their great-grandparents. My absolutely last point is, as many others in this room, I am an immigrant to Canada. I came here over 50 years ago. I am hugely grateful to Canada and its citizens for the privilege of living here ever since, and I'm very grateful to the privilege of being associated with Carleton University. Thank you very much.